I'm just going to start off by saying that I'm probably not the best person to be reviewing this game. I'm not sure what it is about Battle Royale that I don't enjoy. It could be the slow pacing, the large amounts of downtime, or the general lack of polish that a lot of these games have, but so far I'm yet to play one which really clicks with me. When it comes to Royale, H1Z1 isn't the obvious choice on the PS4. With Fortnite having a stranglehold on the genre and also being one of the most popular games period, you could be forgiven for overlooking it entirely. But H1Z1 predates both Fortnite and PUBG by quite some margin. In fact, you might even say that Fortnite's success wouldn't have been possible without building on the concepts established in games like H1Z1 and DayZ. I never played it back on PC, so when it turned up in the PSN store as a free download, my curiosity got the better of me. Was this just another game in the ever-growing Battle Royale space? Or could this little game with a long history possibly be a hidden gem? As I just mentioned, H1Z1 is not a new game. It's been around in some form for at least 3 years. It originally launched on Steam back in 2015 as simply H1Z1. And if you think that it looks similar to PUBG, then that's because Brendan Green, aka Player Unknown, worked as a consultant on the game in the early stages of development. Brendan Green, in case you didn't know, is considered by many as the godfather of Battle Royale. He's responsible for one of the first successful games in the genre. His Arma 2 mod, DayZ Battle Royale, which was released in 2013, was one of the first titles to gain popularity. It not only caught the attention of gamers, but also of Sony Online Entertainment, who hired Green to work on H1Z1. At this time, H1Z1 also had a zombie survival mode similar to that of DayZ. In 2015, Sony decided to sell off Sony Online Entertainment, which would be renamed Daybreak. Not long after this, it was decided to break the game into 2 separate titles: H1Z1 Just Survive and H1Z1 King of the Kill. It's at this point that Green would part ways with H1Z1 and join Korean developer Bluehole, where he would go on to help create the hugely popular PUBG. In 2017, the King of the Kill subtitle was dropped and the game was renamed as simply H1Z1. And that brings us up to 2018, where the game has finally made its way onto the PS4. With really just one mode and not much to do outside of the main event, H1Z1 is a very focused or extremely bare bones experience depending on your point of view. Like most other Battle Royale games, H1Z1 pits you against a large amount of other players in a huge map. You get dropped in, scavenge for useful resources, and try and stay alive long enough to become the sole survivor. You can do this on your own, in a duo, or as a squad of 5. There are a couple of other variations too. Arcade is an unranked version of solo. It's basically the same experience, except there's less at stake because there's no penalty for doing poorly. Combat training is the other option, and it's a bit like Team Deathmatch without a scoreboard. You spawn into a smaller version of the map with some basic weapons and a backpack. You can respawn as many times as you like if you die, and there's no winner either. As the name suggests, it's purely a practice mode, but I'd seriously recommend starting here to get a feel for the weapons, vehicles, and the general mechanics before trying anything else out. Much like Fortnite, you start each game by being airdropped into the map. When you hit the ground, you're completely unarmed, so the first priority is to search your surroundings for weapons, armor, first aid, transportation, and shoes. Making sure that you're well stocked and have an adequate arsenal is critical to survival, as not having the right weapon at the right time can mean an early exit from the game. To raise the stakes, the area of play progressively becomes smaller and smaller as a deadly ring of toxic gas contracts. This happens in waves, forcing the remaining players to get increasingly closer. As you'd expect, as the safe area gets smaller, the action intensifies as players rush to grab the last of the remaining resources. How well you perform towards the end of the match generally depends on how successful you've been at finding powerful weapons and armor. It is possible just to find a hidey hole in the center of the map and wait things out, although this is definitely the least enjoyable way to experience the game. Being a free-to-play game means that there is the usual focus on microtransactions as well as a loot crate system. You do earn in-game credits which you can spend on crates, although at the glacial rate that you earn them, you'd need to sink a substantial amount of time into the game to unlock anything this way. Loot crates contain cosmetic items, and there isn't a giant selection to choose from, but there is enough if customizing your character is something that you're into. None of the options really stood out to me as must-have items, but then again I don't really get overly excited about this sort of stuff anyway. Thankfully, you can only buy or earn cosmetics. There are no stat-based weapons or equipment in either loot crates or available to purchase on their own. Where you get dropped at the start of each match is randomized. Most of the time you'll land near some supplies, and if you get lucky, no one else will be around. Quite often though, you'll need to hustle in order to get what's closest first, and it's not uncommon to be killed only a few moments into the game by whoever got there before you. This is one of the major issues I have with the game. It can be exhilarating to find what you need before getting slaughtered, but the reverse can be equally frustrating. Getting killed before you've had a chance to scratch yourself by someone who simply got a better spawn just isn't fun. It's also possible to spawn into parts of the map that are near impossible to get out of without dying. So quite often you'll spend only a couple of minutes in the game before you die and you're back in the menus. Thankfully, finding a match and loading into a game is a reasonably quick and easy process, but be prepared to see the menus a lot, at least early on. Initially you can't carry much, so locating a backpack should be at the top of your to-do list. This will allow you to carry more than 2 weapons, and equally as important, it increases the amount of first aid and bandages you can hold. Even when you've found the military backpack, which has an additional weapon slot, you'll still need to compromise on which weapons to carry. Managing your inventory is a key component to success, and unfortunately the UI doesn't do a great job at letting you see at a glance what you have. When swapping between weapons, for example, it isn't always immediately clear what you have equipped. This can lead to problems when trying to quickly swap to something that you're trying to discard. And this is something that you do a lot because you're constantly finding new and better weapons. It also pays to have a variety of close, medium and long range options, as you never know what type of combat you'll be involved in. Weapons all have distinct handling traits. Close range weapons like the riot shotgun tear through enemies up close but are useless at any other range. So for mid to long range engagements you'll need a variety of SMGs, assault rifles and sniper rifles. Given the unpredictable nature and number of gunfights you're likely to encounter, you'll need to be proficient with at least 2 to 3 types of weapon. You also can't guarantee that you'll find your favourite, so being familiar with as many as possible is definitely a good idea. This probably all sounds very promising, except for one glaring problem: the controls. Even with the sensitivity dials all the way down, and I mean all the way down, shooting from the hip is very difficult. It's obvious that aiming down the sights is the way to go, but stopping to aim generally makes you an easier target to hit. There are a bunch of sliders to help tweak the controls, but the constant dips in frame rate combined with the occasional lag can make some gunfights feel impossible. I'll freely admit that aiming isn't something I'm particularly good at, but it's especially unforgiving here. This is definitely one area that doesn't feel like it has made a smooth transition from PC to console. Navigating around is also a bit clumsy. Animations like jumping look stiff and don't really give you an accurate idea of where you might be able to get to. Vehicles fare slightly better when it comes to handling. They all have their own unique characteristics, and while the controls don't provide a Gran Turismo level of nuance, they certainly get the job done. Something that doesn't make much sense though is that it's impossible to mow down enemy players. Either this is a bug or a strange design choice, but not being able to use your vehicle offensively feels a bit limited. Vehicles still play an important role though. They're useful for getting around and avoiding danger, but they also allow you to transport other players. Even the quad bike can have a passenger, and having a rear gunner can be a deadly combination. Personally, I found that playing with other people is much better than going it alone. It can be a bit of a lonely experience lone wolfing, and there's more opportunity for strategy when playing with others. Epic gun battles tend to break out more frequently when playing in teams too, and cruising around with your posse causing trouble is a lot of fun. One of the central ideas of the Battle Royale design philosophy is that it provides a different experience each time you play. In theory, this gives it far more replayability than a typical shooter that lets players pick their loadouts and has easily memorizable maps. Randomized spawns combined with randomized item locations do a good job at keeping things unpredictable. While most of the time you won't know exactly where to look for useful items, buildings and other landmarks are usually a safe bet. Military crates, which generally contain more valuable items like rare weapons and powerful armor, are one of the more sought after commodities. Unfortunately, these seem to turn up in the same location frequently. This often results in experienced players camping known locations, waiting to ambush those thinking they got there first. The map, while being huge, is always the same, so over time, like any environment, it can be learned. Players with extensive experience therefore have a huge advantage and are able to seek out the best gear much faster. It's pretty obvious when you encounter these players too, as you'll typically get shot by someone you didn't see. H1Z1 is a strange game. Its graphics are mediocre, it handles like a mid-90s shareware title, and there's more than a few areas that need polish. But somehow it still works, and after everything that I've complained about, I can still play it for hours on end even if I'm not doing well. Up until now, Battle Royale was a genre I didn't understand. And while H1Z1 might not be the best example of this type of game, there's just enough magic to draw you in and keep you playing. It's not a great game by any stretch of the imagination, and I'm sure if you're a Fortnite or a PUBG fan, you can pick apart my arguments pretty easily. But if Fortnite's colourful Disney aesthetic and building mechanics don't get you tight in the pants, and you want something more like PUBG on the PS4, then this is definitely worth checking out.